G'day, I'm Scot McPhie and I'm going to tell you, well, I was going to call this How to Save the World, but I think that's overdoing it a bit. So I've got a list of 92 or 93 different ideas which I think will make the world better. The point isn't to save the world, the point is to just be the best you can be, and then the world will come better. But anyway, that's something we'll look at. So I'm just going to go through all of these points, and just some are original, some you would have heard before. They're just down here because they're good ideas. Where I am at the moment, there's a bit of traffic noise, unfortunately, so hopefully you won't be fighting that too much. But anyway, here we go. Number one, I think a lot of people need to realise that whatever you do imposes your beliefs on others. There's no such thing as not being involved or sitting back or not wanting to affect others. That's just inescapable. Everything you do, it does affect others. So the point is, act from your conscience and your intelligence, which I'll look at in another point. But don't think you can ever not be involved. Everything you do, we're all connected. Everything is involved, is connected. Okay, number two, these are all just in a random order. Lend someone you trust money at 0%. My wife and I, at one stage we wanted to buy a car, and this was before banks were throwing money out left, right and centre. And we were short 6,000 or 8,000 or something, and they wouldn't lend it to us, and we couldn't get it. But then a friend of my wife's lent it $6,000 just up front, 0%, no questions asked, no nothing. We got the car and paid the friend back in the course of a year or two, and it made a huge difference for us and still is. And I think if you do something like that, you're showing trust for another and you're just going a long way to helping them. So I think it's good for everyone, both parties. Number three, filter your water and then drink it cool. We've got a filter at home, just one of those little drip filters with a candle in it, and we cool it in the fridge. I think I heard somewhere that drinking cool water is better for you, particularly for exercising and trying to lose weight, because burning fat is a heat-inducing process. So if you cool it on the inside, you can burn more and get fitter. I think it's just better for you, and you know, who knows what's in water nowadays. So filter it. Get a rainwater tank, even if you can't afford a huge big one. Just set up a little one. We had a little 200 litre drum which we used for a year or two before we could get an actual tank. And it makes you think about water, think about natural resources and conserve them and use them wisely. So now we've got a huge big tank, but we still use a little one as well. It's a good idea, I think. Number five, think every time you go into a building or go into a constructed place, think what kind of ecosystem is this replacing, because it's creating an artificial ecosystem but it's also replacing a natural one. So think, you know, what did it cost to create this artificial one, what's been lost in the environment because of it, and was it really worth it? Everywhere, like everything being connected, every man-made thing is a cost to the environment. So just think about what natural ecosystem the artificial one you're in has replaced. And is it worth it? Number six, get chickens. We've got chooks, they're great fun. The good thing about having chooks is, apart from the eggs, is that you never have waste food, or hardly ever, because they can just eat so much food, or you know, so much scraps, and you get eggs back for it. It's a really good idea if you can. 7, grow your own veggies. Something I've been experimenting with is staggering the planting. So instead of getting all your tomatoes in one go, you space them out. So every week or two you've got, I mean, even though tomatoes fruit for a long period of time, but whatever the crop is, just so you stagger the fruiting, so you've got them for a long period of time. And just see about growing them indoors or companion planting. There's a lot you can do rather than just, you know, stick them in the ground and see what happens. And growing your own food, again, connecting with nature, and you know, you reduce freight costs and greenhouse gases from freight and all that kind of stuff. So that's a good idea. Okay, number 8, go and kill something and eat it. Now, that might sound a bit barbaric, but it's not. I guess if it's done in a humane way. But the point is, like if you're fishing or hunting or something, if you actually kill something and take its life, you're connecting with it, I think, in a very deep and spiritual kind of a way, and it teaches you to value its life and what it's giving to you when you're eating it. And it will teach you, when you're not getting food that way, to value what you have got rather than wasting it, because more often than not something or a number of things died for the food that you have got, and we just eat it and chuck it out unfinished and all of that without really thinking about the cost of what it took for that to come to us. So even if you don't like that idea, I think it's important. Maybe just fishing or something like that just teaches you to value what you've killed basically and what it's given you. Okay, number 9, look for a hand up, not a hand out. Big difference between the two. I think it's a psychological one, and it has to do with your outlook in life and what you're trying to do, and it's way too easy just to look for a hand out, I think. Well, this is similar, number 10. Don't wallow in self-pity. Again, that's easy to do, and I can think of times when I've done that, and doing that is you kneecapping yourself or knobbling yourself, and you don't serve yourself or the world by being like that. Number 11, accept how you're growing old. I think a lot of wasted time and energy is put into pretending that you're young or trying to stay young, and not looking at the whole arc of your life and just accepting that you're not here forever, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's just part of the deal. So accept how you're growing old. Number 12, spend a lot more time with your kids. There's probably very few people who would say they spend enough or too much time with your kids, and all of it, as long as it's quality, worthwhile time, all of it's worthwhile. I guess the thing with all of these is not necessarily all of them apply to everyone, but just, see which ones apply to you. Number 13, don't be thin-skinned. Allow yourself to be laughed at, and embrace it, enjoy it, add to it, love it. Don't believe in it, but allow others and yourself to lighten the load with it. And I can tell you, people have laughed at me for years, and it's fine. As long as you're serious about the stuff that has to be serious about, and have a sense of humour, be laughed at. It just makes the world go around a lot more easier, I think, if people are less strung up and just allow themselves to be laughed at, basically. 14, switch off standby power. I suppose everyone probably knows about this by now anyway, but the amount of electricity that's consumed just by TVs and computers and what have you on standby is just ridiculous, and you don't need it, so turn it off at the wall. Okay, number 15. Okay, stop this rampant individuality. Okay, the one thing that really annoys me is that people think that we're all individuals and we all live in this fantastic lovey-dovey world where you can do whatever you like and it doesn't affect others, and that your only responsibility is to your own whims and your own desires without thinking of how it affects others. And as I said right at the start, we're all connected. Everything you do affects others, so don't think that you can live the life of an individual without having any effect on others. And the problem is, when it's all this rampant individualism, often the effects on others are quite negative. There was a great example in my hometown in Brisbane, and it happened all around Australia, and they're starting to pull it back now, but there were these huge big billboards that said, want longer lasting sex. They were massive. They were literally like 2 stories high, and I don't know how many feet, 40 or 50 feet wide, and you just could not escape them. And all sorts of people were getting really angry about them, because as you drive around town, you'd have 5-year-old children reading them and asking, what's sex? What's longer lasting sex? How can I have longer lasting sex? And things like this. And I actually rang up the company at one stage to, basically get stuck into them about it. And they acted just like it didn't affect anyone, or no one should care, or, you know, it's not my business to complain about it. And they were just totally oblivious, or just didn't want to know about how they were affecting others. Now, about that sign in particular, okay, obviously there's a need for the medical procedure they're offering, but, you know, you don't go putting that out where it's, you know, where it's going to affect children and people who don't need to know about it. You know, the advertising was just all over the place, and as a parent it was just really, really annoying. That's just one example, but, you know, there's certainly lots of examples with the way individuals behave. So we've just got to be responsible for others, or responsible to the fact that we affect others. You can't second guess yourself too much and try and, you know, cushion everyone from everything. You still got to be honest to your conscience, but bear in mind how you're affecting others as well. And there is a balance in there. This is something, number 16, this is something my wife said to me once, which is stuck, and I just think it's great. She said, "You're rich when you have people in your life." And I just think that's really true. It's, you know, it's the times you share with others that become the most meaningful and the most enjoyable and the most memorable. And if you have time for others, then, well, your life is rich. You know, goods aren't really going to make you that happy. They make you a little bit happy, but, you know, that's not what stays with you. Okay, 17. Help someone achieve their dreams. And to be honest, I don't know if I've done this much myself for others, but I've certainly come to appreciate others doing it for me. I think I have with others, but not as much as I should have, I guess. But when you do help another like that, you're sorry about all the noise on how loud it is on the speakers here, but anyway, when you do help others, you're connecting with them, and you're connecting with a new part of yourself as well, and it can just be a really worthwhile thing, because you're setting your ideas and aims and goals aside and just working for someone else. It's a connection as much as it is someone else realising their dream or helping them too. So it's a very worthwhile thing. Okay, 18. Realise that self-confidence comes from achieving things in the world. And I was kind of caught up with this a little bit. There's this, I don't know, this new age crap about you've got to feel right about yourself inside, and you know, to a very small degree that's right. You do have to kind of be comfortable with yourself, but that's not really going to give you self-confidence. The thing that's going to give you self-confidence is what you can achieve in the world, and just getting out and doing things and getting them done. And the more you do, the more you realise you can do, and the more your confidence grows. You know, maybe 5% is how you feel about yourself, 95% is from what you do in the world. And just getting off your backside, giving it a go. Even if you don't think you can do it, that's even a greater joy when you do something you weren't entirely sure that you could do. So, you know, hard work, commitment, the old-fashioned way, and self-confidence comes from that. Okay, 19. Raise injured animals, injured native animals. Now, this is something that we've been doing in our family with possums. And the thing is, if you raise native animals, you get to know, well, basically the native fauna in your area and how they're dealing with the onslaught of people and introduced animals. And you know, I remember once we had a little baby possum. It was about this big, and it had one eye that had been ripped out by a cat. And you know, if you can feel the timidness and the emotions of an animal that's undergone that, it gives you a whole new outlook on us and the kind of animals that we favour. So as much as it's good to save these animals, it's also a good learning experience about ourselves and the kind of effects that we have. Okay, 20. Get to know your local Indigenous history. And by that I mean actually get to know families in your area, the actual people, because then it stops being something that's theoretical and something that you've read about in a textbook, and starts being something that becomes very meaningful, and you learn about families and you learn about forebears who suffered, and it puts it in a very real and very personal context, and it has a huge value because of that. 21. Compost. probably fairly obvious the reasons for that. But again, lots of kitchen scraps, just put it back into the earth, put in the compost first and then back in the earth. Just good environmentally. And again, getting involved and teaching about the cycles of nature. 22, don't buy cheaper imported foods. Kind of what I was saying earlier about growing vegetables. There's just so much pollution that comes about because of the freight and things like that. I mean, I remember being in our supermarket once looking at a jar of jams, a jar of marmalade which came from Belgium or somewhere. And I thought, what the hell is this doing in Australia? And vice versa, Australian things that could be grown in Belgium, it just doesn't make sense. I don't care what the economic arguments for it is, it's just not good. So buy local. Okay, number 23. It's for all the blokes out there. Think with your head first, not with your dick. Basically, you'll find that you'll just find that everything's better, even the sex, basically. The thing is that, well, think with your heart first, is probably a better way to put it. I don't know, it should be self-explanatory, shouldn't it? But it doesn't seem to be. If you open up your heart and your mind and get into a real respectful, loving, nurturing relationship, you'll find you'll have all the sex you ever wanted, and it'll be a lot better than it ever was before. It's just heart and soul first. I think the problem with sex is you can't deny that you need it, but you've got to get it in balance, and you've got to have the other things, the higher priorities in place first. The other thing too is that, if you are just thinking with your dick first, then you end up doing things that you regret, and you've got to be the same person all the time, I think, and you can't do things that aren't really you, because it's just not good for you or for anyone. So heart and soul first, and everything will be better, even the sex. Okay, 24. Go to bed early, get up early, and start the day with a walk. Just lovely, fresh way to invigorate yourself, and it's also getting in cycle with the rhythms of nature, with the sun coming up and the sun going down, which I think is an important thing. Even if you can't live like that all the time, it's a good thing to experience, certainly for a while. It's good for your body, and I think it's good for your mind. 25, repair and restore things that are old. And the reason for this is, well, there's a number of reasons. One is that you're conserving things, you're keeping things in use and reducing the need to manufacture new things unnecessarily. But you're also getting in touch with the past and with people in the past. If you look at the technology that they could create and that they had to deal with, if you're working on that level and restoring things at that level, it just gives you a touch of the mindset and how the world used to be, and I think that kind of thing's quite important. It's always good to know about the past, I think. 26, use biodegradable cleaning agents and old-fashioned methods like bicarb of soda. It's amazing what you can clean just with bicarb of soda. The simpler and the more natural, the better, basically. Okay, 27. Give donations to charities, even if they're only small. It helps. A lot of people giving a small amount adds up to a lot, and it's just good to think about others as well. I remember once I collected for Red Cross quite a few years ago, and in the street I went to, there were some wealthy people and some poor people. And the amazing thing was the people who gave the most were the poorest. And that was, I think, because they knew what it was like to suffer. But all of us giving a bit is an important thing, I think. It's as good for you as it is good for the people who are receiving it. Okay, 28. Use both your intellect and your conscience when making decisions or just acting or living life normally. Because I think rationalism for its own end is destructive, because it doesn't necessarily account for the human condition or the human need. You can't be totally emotive and unrational, but you can't be totally irrational and unemotive or human as well. Combine the two. Yeah, either one by itself is destructive. Okay, 29. This is something we've kind of had to do out of necessity, I guess, but shop around for specials. Put the extra money that you earn into good use. We get the junk mail each week for the supermarket. We go through, see what's on special, and basically plan our meals around that. And you save a lot of money, and we're putting that, to good use in other areas in the family. So, yeah, shop around specials. Okay, number 30, buy second-hand goods as much as is practical, and if they're reliable and they're going to work and why. This is a bit similar to the one on restoring things. I guess in this case you're just not looking at restoring them. The reasons for it are you're keeping things out of landfill and you're stopping new things that don't need to be made, you're stopping them from being made. So there's a huge amount of stuff that's in fine condition second-hand. You just go to various op shops or wherever. Okay, 31. Make the effort to watch a funny film or to go to some stand-up comedy or something. Just take time out to do something that is nothing except comedic or enjoyable or fun. It's just therapy for the heart and the soul and the nerves. So do it. Do it now. Not now. Or maybe you are doing it now. Maybe you think this is funny. But do it sometime soon. And do it regularly as well. Okay, 32. Drugs. Don't even bother with drugs. No matter what you think the pros are, the cons far outweigh them. Most people I know who tried to justify taking drugs said it was to do with their outlook in society and all this kind of crap. I mean, if you really want a mind-altering experience, just try honesty instead. All this crap about people have a right to take drugs and stuff like that. Well, the thing that gets me is they don't think about their children, they don't think about other family members that affect them. Maybe there are reasons why they have low self-esteem and things like that, but the drugs just aren't going to solve it at all. All it's going to do is affect the way your brain works and inhibit your ability to solve the problems and affect others in a really bad way, particularly children. So, there's just there's no justification or no reason at all for them. Okay, 33. Look after your own interests, but don't take away the ability of others to do so as well. And I guess that speaks of selfishness or too selfishness. And it's good to go out and do and achieve and get things in the world, but there's a degree to which you've got to say, or you've got to think about how it's affecting others as well. So that's that one. 34. Watch the sunrise. I haven't done it for a while actually, but I used to love doing it when I was younger. And it's like a spiritual thing. It's like the promise of a new day and the sun coming up. It's just beautiful, and I suppose it'd be nice to see it in the city, but to me, always seeing it in the bush, in a natural context, was the most amazing thing. So do that. Do it tomorrow morning. Okay, 35. Spend time and listen to old people. Just getting to old age is an achievement and deserves respect. And there's something that can be learned from everyone, and particularly every old person. So take time out and listen and share with old people. Okay, 36. Go on a bushwalk, and by bushwalk I mean in proper wild bush, not in a park or something, like a botanic garden or something like that. And just get in an environment where you can forget about civilization, forget about society. You can feel yourself. You should be able to feel like you're the only person in the world, or that you're back to the days when we were really connected with nature, back to the hunter-gatherer days, and just feel your life is part of the earth. And because the thing is, we've never left that. We just think we have, mentally we've stopped thinking about that. And I just think that's really important. So if you don't live where there's real bush, go for a holiday somewhere where there is, and get your head out of civilization and into the real natural world. Yeah, I've got here, you should feel part of the truth of being alive, because that's what I think you do in that environment. Okay, 37. If you live in a non-Western, rapidly developing economy, don't be fooled. The grass isn't always greener on the other side. You know, the thing that we're lacking in the West is what a lot of traditional societies have in spades, and that's community sense, you know, personal meaning through relationships with others and place in communities, and small communities, you know. I know that in traditional and developing countries, education and health are lacking, and that's something that we have in a better degree to the West, but everything else in the West, to be honest, is, I don't think, very good. Certainly in relation to the communities that have that real kind of personal bond, I think. So, yeah, bond with themselves and with nature. Okay, 38. Protect the innocence of children. There was that example I had of the sign before, and another really good example was at one of the school where my daughter goes. One day she came home and she said she wasn't allowed to borrow a book from the library. The librarian wouldn't let her, and I thought, oh, this is interesting. And so I went into the library to talk to the librarian, because she told my daughter that she wasn't old enough. So I went into the library to talk to the librarian about it. She started backpedaling, getting all defensive, and I said, no, I think you've done the right thing. I've come to actually thank you, because I'd much rather that, you know, I like people to, you know, to care or to think about what's going on and be involved. And it's, you know, it's better to overprotect than underprotect when they're you know, young. And you know, I mean, I know as kids grow up, you have to slowly remove those boundaries, which is good, because if you don't, then they're not going to develop properly. But I certainly think when they're young, you've got to protect their innocence. And in Western society now, that is just falling apart way too quickly. And you know, some people say, well, in traditional societies they grow up much sooner, and it's true, they do. But they're in a context where that is completely different, where you're growing up and becoming an adult when you're a teenager is completely different in that society, because the society is structured around it and it works that way, and there's care and support mechanisms, and it just functions that way. Western society, it doesn't function that way. We prolong coming into adulthood till God knows when now, probably the late 30s or late 20s, early 30s, but you know, but then we try and sexually mature kids well before they're mentally or physically ready for it. And we do that in the context where there isn't the support, you know, the decent psychological or personal or relationship support for children who are far more mature for the years than they really are. You know, we think they're more mature than they really are. So, yeah, so that's a big one, that one. Okay, 39. Avoid situations in which you know you'll crack, you know, where you know your weaknesses are. You know, you should be smart enough not to get suckered into something that you know you're going to fall for. You know, you should avoid that before you kind of get down to that point where you can't, where you give in or whatever, I guess. Okay, 40. When something goes wrong and you're fixing it, don't just fix it and leave it. Make a systemic change so that it doesn't happen again, or even design the system so that design or redesign the system so that, you know, these mistakes don't happen again. It's too easy just to fix something and then forget about it, you know, not take proper responsibility, and then it happens again. Okay, 41. Plant native trees that are local to your area. It's better for the local fauna, it's better for the local water supply if you're in a dry area, and it will bring you closer to a knowledge of your natural area, or the natural habitat in your area. Okay, 42. Use grey water. That's probably self-explanatory, I imagine. There's a lot of water that's wasted that, you know, could be used through grey water processes. So that's something to look into. We, when we had a drought where we live, we basically kept our garden alive through grey water. So, use that. You know, we in the West, we're so keen to use water once and then get rid of it. Okay, 43. Okay, don't be afraid of criticism. You shouldn't confuse your sense of self-esteem with your right to do whatever you're doing. You know, you've got to be able to listen without being so personally involved. You know, if you're an artist, for instance, I know from personal experience, it's very hard to take criticism objectively, but if you can, it's so much the better for you. People just think that anything critical is challenging their right to do something. You don't. You have a right to perform your art or whatever it is, but you know, if you're going to listen to criticism and be critical in your listening to it, then you're going to be so much the better off for it. You know, you've got to sort the chaff from the hay with it, but you know, the good constructive criticism, take on board you take that on board and then forget about the rest. And you don't want to suffer from the too much positive reinforcement syndrome, which I can't stand. You know, if just don't be afraid of the truth, I guess. Okay, if you're 44, if you feel like your life is meaningless, ask yourself this: are you living it in a meaningful way? You know, often that comes from how you treat others and just how much commitment and just straight hard work you put into getting things done. But if you want a meaningful life, you've got to live it meaningfully. Okay, 45. Accept that life has its limits, and once you accept them, then you know, I think you'll be a lot happier. It's just part of the nature of life that, you know, maybe you can't have children, or maybe you can't live forever, or you can't look like this, or you can't, you know, accept it, be yourself, get over it. You're beautiful as you are. Okay, put it that way. As long as, you know, the way you are is all right. If you're some horrible axe-wielding maniac, you know, then fix that. But, okay, righto, here's another pet hate of mine. 46, don't look to the state to fix everything for you. You know, there's too much of this bloody nanny state rubbish where you think the state's got to raise your children, or, you know, give you a living, or even a pension. You know, you stand on your own 2 feet more. I suppose maybe, you know, it's reasonable in people's old age to expect a pension, but all of this stuff like, I have a right to childcare and I have a right for the state to take responsibility for my children and I don't have to, all that kind of crap, forget it. Stand on your own 2 feet and forget about the state doing it for you. Okay, 47. Something I should do more of. Live a rugged life so you don't have to buy fitness. Just the way you live itself will make you fit. You know, don't take a bus, ride a bike, don't take the elevator, go up the stairs, do it regularly, make that part of the nature of your life so your lifestyle itself makes you fit, so you don't have to go and waste money at, you know, places that you don't have to go to. Okay, 48, recycle heaps. Recycle everything you can. Our recycle bin is usually chockers, and, you know, we're just throwing out, you know, I don't think we're going to any extraordinary length. It's just that if you're conscientious about what you've got, there is a lot that you can recycle. So do that. 49, buy things with less packaging. Again, it's, you know, stands to reason, less packaging, less waste, less resources used, less pollution, and all the rest of it. I once bought a razor. I swear it had like 5 levels of packaging or something in it. I was so annoyed I was going to post it to them, but I never did. Put it in the recycling bag. But anyway, 50, make your voice heard. You know, you can't expect change if you're not going to stand up and, you know, if you're not going to put your hand up and get involved in the processes in your community or your country or whatever that can affect change. So yeah, make your voice heard. And something which probably could have been another point, but you know, you can't have great change without great risk. So you know, but you can't improve things, and the world needs great change, so don't be afraid of it. Okay, 51, use renewable energy sources. Again, pretty straightforward. An easy way to do it, if your electricity supply gives you, like a renewable component that you can buy, just do that. As well as looking into other methods that you can. Okay, 52, look at your life in its entirety. We're all headed to the grave. It doesn't mean that it has to be a bad trip or anything, but just know that try and live your life in a way that encompasses that there's this whole arc, I guess. I'll never forget when I was about 14 or something, I used to go to boarding school in Sydney, and I was sitting at a train station. There was a computer show, being a minor nerd. I went into this computer show, and we had to wear reasonable, kind of good, not really good casuals, I guess, to go out on leave from the school. So anyway, I was sitting there, and there was this old man sitting next to me. He must have been in his 60s or something, I guess. And this was in the early 1980s. So I suppose he would have been born early 1920s, I guess. Probably went through the Depression, maybe the war. But anyway, he was sitting there and he was just looking down like this and just mumbling to himself, and he just kept mumbling. And I could kind of hear what he said, but I was ignoring him. And then he just turned to me and he goes, "Aim," bam, and smashed me with a backhanded punch into the nose. And what he'd been doing was he was mumbling to himself, and he kept looking over at me, looking at my clothes and my shirt, and he was saying to himself, "What did I ever do with my life? Whatever happened to my life? Hey, whatever happened?" And then it just got too much, and that's when he hit me and said, "Hey," and that's just stayed with me for my whole life, because, well, first of all, it was a shock. I had a bloody nose, and I walked away and didn't really, fully comprehend it. But, I really feel sorry for him, because to be that frustrated with your life by the end of, towards the end of your life, to do that, I always thought I never wanted to be like that. And I don't know, it's just, know that you're heading towards the end of your life, and make sure you have a good life before you get there. And good life isn't a self-indulgent life. So yeah. Okay, 53, assimilation, and this is always a hot topic in societies that have indigenous cultures or large immigrant populations. And the fact is, if you're I'm all for indigenous people maintaining identity and culture, but also if you want to join in with the rest of the world and enjoy all the fruits that there are to get through what the rest of the world offers, then you have to assimilate to a certain degree. And I think particularly where retention of culture isn't quite the same for immigrants as it is for indigenous people, it's very important that you learn the language, you learn the skills, you have a way to engage with the society around you, so you can get everything that you can and contribute everything that you can through that. I think cultural background and things like that, I'm totally understand for indigenous people that should be the number one sense of identity, but for people who aren't indigenous, and then again, it should only be the number one sense of identity if they want it to be. But for people who aren't, where you came from, if you've immigrated into a country, that can be like a secondary thing. I don't think that should be held up to the exclusion of what you can benefit by joining in with the culture where you're going, where you've come to. I think there's far too much politically correct rubbish around cultural identity as opposed to the practical value of joining in. Okay, be tolerant. My wife's a Christian, I'm an atheist. And it's the best relationship in my life. The stumbling blocks that we've had at the time were hard, but in retrospect have only been minor compared to what we've got. So I don't know, a lot of tolerance goes a lot of way, and open-mindedness helps go a long way as well. But don't think any differences are insurmountable. Okay, 55, again about kids, don't get sucked into all of this BS about early childhood learning centres and you must put your 1 and 2 and 3-year-old into these state or private run learning centres. You know, the most valuable and the most important thing for young children is one-on-one quality meaningful time with one or you know, either of their parents. I think this childcare industry is a fraud. Well, I think most people don't need it. Very few people genuinely need it, I think. Most people just do it because they either devalue their role as a parent and they think a career is more important, and I can tell you it's not. Nothing will be as important in your life as being a good parent. You know, or people just do it for totally selfish reasons so they can buy things they don't need, you know, because they're too lazy to do without them. And the children are the ones who suffer. So, you know, unless if you're extremely on your knees in absolute economic dire straits, I just think that sending your kid off to these childcare centres before school age, I just think it's rubbish. So there. Okay, 56. Okay, if you want goodness in the world, enact it. Goodness, think of goodness as something that is, think of goodness as something that only exists when you're doing it, not something that is. It's only there, it only exists when you're doing it. I think part of the big problem we have in the world today is particularly with religions, they conceptualise it as some external thing. And you know, too many people spend too much time praying to make the world better instead of actually doing something to make it better. You know, goodness only exists when you're doing it, so go and do it. Yeah. Okay, 57. Probably just more something to think about, I guess. People only do what they want to do, you know, or what they want to do the most. I guess it's like that book about the line of path of least resistance or whatever, you know. Often people say, oh, you know, I wanted to, but I couldn't. Well, the point is they didn't really want to. You know, sometimes the cost of doing what you want to do might be too high. Sometimes maybe it's valid, but then you actually did what you really wanted to do, which was this other thing. So it's just a useful thing to think about. 58. Whatever good qualities you deride in someone else is only because your own fear of lacking them in someone else, and lacking them in yourself. Let me repeat that. So if you see someone doing a good thing or possessing a good quality, if you deride that, it's only because you fear that you lack it yourself. You know, you should celebrate it. You should join in with them, congratulate them, encourage them. You know, there's no need to denigrate a good thing in someone else just because you think you may or may not lack it yourself, you know. 59. You're only doing it when you're doing it. Now, this is an age-old thing for people in the film industry and other arts areas, and anything, I guess. But, you know, it's like what I really am is a director or something, but, you know, I'm a waiter at the moment, you know. It's hard to get from one to the other, I know personally, but, you know, really I think you're only doing something when you're doing it. Doesn't mean you can't find ways to do it, but, you know, don't kid yourself. That's what I'm saying. Okay, 60. I guess the whole point of this and life really is it's not about saving the world, it's just about being a decent, honest person yourself, doing the right thing yourself, coming to the right way and the right disposition yourself. And if you do that, then the world, or if we all did that, the world will come to be as it should be. But it's not about whether or not other people are doing what's right, it's just about doing right yourself because it's right. So think less about how the world's going, just think more internally about finding truth and honesty and love and being of that. It's much more important. 61. If you want a specific result to happen, then you have to take responsibility for it happening yourself. You can't, you know, you can't just sit back and expect others to do it, or, you know, if you just want the world to stay as it is, just sit back and let the process continue as it is. You know, somewhere along the line, if you really want something to happen, then you've got to take responsibility for it happening yourself. Okay, 62, there's what I call a hard and a soft solution to everything. Particularly things like raising children or law enforcement are obvious ways it applies, or implementations, And so what I mean by that is that, say you've got people breaking the law, well then you can have the big stick of the law saying I'm going to punish you or imprison you or do whatever. That's the hard end, but then you've also got to have the soft end. You've got to look at why they're doing it, psychological reasons, and also what kind of environment are these people growing up in which helps lead them to wanting to do it. And I think often there's too much argument about only doing one approach or the other. I think both approaches have to be run concurrently. So yeah. 63, in regard to racism, I think that it exists in all cultures, unfortunately. It's human beings don't have to be like that, but there is it is a thing that we're capable of. And I think if the tables have been turned, if different races lived in different parts of the world, or if different cultures accelerated towards technology and what have you faster than other parts, you'd still have racism from, one culture towards another, be it different cultures or races that are doing it now. It's just, unfortunately, it's a thing that we're capable of, but we don't have to be of it. But, I certainly don't think it's limited to the major proponents of it at the moment. Now 64, this is a little bugbear. There's a lot of people that get really morally indignant about rights, and I guess they're really self-righteous about, I have a right to this and I have a right to that, like I have a right to childcare. And most of these rights are not actually rights. They're they're privileges which are normally paid for by others. I'm actually starting to dry out. I think I need a drink. But they're privileges that are paid for by others. Most of what people call rights aren't really rights. I believe in basic human rights, but I don't believe in all of this self-indignant righteousness that we have in a lot of Western culture. Now, I've got to grab a drink. Okay, I'm going to keep this camera running because I want to do this all in one take. Just wait there. Okay, so we're about 2/3 of the way there. I'm actually in a motel at the moment. I've been here for work. I might have to blur that out if that's an allowable product placement. Hey? Okay. Sorry about this. And got to do it. I had some chocolate before. We can cut this out of the little YouTube bits, but the the big long running thing. Sorry. It's hard to actually eat chocolate in one go, isn't it? This is mint chocolate. Alright. Okay. Alright, 65. And this is a quote from Bertrand Russell, I think. And it's one of my favourite quotes. It really made me realise a few things. The danger isn't so much in what you believe, but how much you believe it. And I just think that makes so much sense because, if you're open-minded, you will see contrary arguments and you won't be a danger, I guess. It's the extremists who aren't open-minded that are dangerous. And and also when you approach others, it's about what they're like and getting to know them more so than what you think about their beliefs, I think. Yeah. Okay. Similar to that, 66, the truth is often in the middle ground. Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at anything where there's a broad range of views, then the most value is often in the middle ground. I'm sure there are some instances where there are, some in that range. Some of the more outer views might be maybe the truer or more applicable, but generally, the truth is often in the middle ground. Yeah, I think I've kind of covered this before actually, but 67. Living your life with lasting values. There's too much selfishness and me now, eternal youth kind of crap. Like I was saying earlier, just look at the arc of your life and try and have values in your life now, which are also going to sustain you for the future and in the future. And similar to this, yeah, similar. Well, I guess it's similar, but maybe it's not the same point. But I can remember. I remember cleaning my teeth once, looking in the mirror at myself when I was about 17 or 18, and just looking at myself, just thinking. And me now at 40, how old am I? 42. Yeah, 42. That kid at 17, if he was to see this person at 42, I would hope that he would be proud of him. I've done some things I'm not proud of, but I've done other things that I am, and I'm more proud than not proud. But you know what I mean? Like you want to have some connection or some outlook that lasts you your whole life in a way that. So you don't grow up and be a different person or completely different person. Obviously you've got to change a bit, but you don't lose your way and become a completely different person to the kind of person you were when you were younger. And likewise, as you grow older into old age, try and live now with some values that will see you through into that well. If that makes sense. I never said I was going to explain all this well. Okay. Okay, 68. Don't be so full of spin that you can't call a spade a spade. And a great example of this I always think of is I saw Tom Cruise being interviewed on Parkinson once, and Parky was asking him about what's it like to be so famous, and he was talking about, I think he went to Cairo or Egypt or something, and the only time they could get out to have a look around was at midnight. And he asked Tom Cruise about this, and Cruise was saying, oh, it's fantastic, it was a great opportunity to have a look around and see the town. And Parky would say, yeah, but you have to do it at midnight. Oh, it's a fantastic opportunity to be somewhere. And there was just a complete lack of acknowledgement of the negative side of things. I'm all for being buoyed by the positive, but you've also got to be truthful about the negative. Don't spin yourself out of reality, out of your grip on reality, basically. Yeah. Okay, 69. I think most people don't realise how hardcore you have to be to really make environmental, or to make a positive environmental impact, a real environmental change. Now, my wife and I have got some friends who live on an organic farm. They've got 300 acres of bush and there's a bit of an organic orchard on it. But they live in like a timber hut with... Do they have electricity? They have got electricity. They don't have running water. They grow all their own food. They really have got a minimal environmental footprint, and I really admire them. And then you look at things like that Live Earth concert and the huge amount of litter that was left behind, and you just compare reality to grandstanding, and there's way too many feel-good exercises in the environmental movement, I think, as opposed to actual real change and people really doing the hard yards. So if you're fair income about it, have a really good think, because it's a lot harder than I think people realise. Okay. 70. Now I found that generally the more beliefs or ideals you have, the more insecure you actually are. or the more unsure of yourself you are rather than actually sure of yourself. And this is because the less willing you are to open up and trust others. And if you're like that, you miss out on the joy of doing something just for someone else because you're too insecure and pent up. And I guess I only know this because of my own experience. And I guess, to be honest, it was the times that I was most lost that I had the strongest ideals. And the more you accept yourself and come to love yourself, the more you shouldn't be open to everything, that's for sure, but the more that you can get out of your comfort zone and work with others, and the closer you get to others or with others. Okay, 71, pacifism, your favourite. I used to be a pacifist years ago, and it really is a funny thing because I can remember once I had dinner with some friends in the city in Brisbane, and that was on the south side, and a friend, a female, I walked with her back across the bridge into the city. I just walked with her so she'd be safe basically when she went and got a bus or whatever she did. And then walking back over the bridge, there was a guy being attacked on the opposite side of the bridge by a gang of teenagers, I guess. It would have been about 10 of them or something. And they just had him down, kicking him basically, and they had his head lined up like a soccer ball and they were kicking him. And I jumped over the fence and ran over the other side and started remonstrating with them. And, basically said, look, you've made your effing point, leave him alone, you're going to kill him. And I guess I was lucky because there was a fence, like a guardrail thing, whatever, in between. So, I got punched, but nothing, major or anything. But it could have been worse, I guess, if the barrier wasn't there, is what I'm saying. But that was instinctive to just jump over. I didn't give it a second thought, just bang, just straight over, just because of the outrage at what I was seeing, and it was just a really passionate thing. And honestly, I kid you not, they could have thrown him over the bridge and I would have jumped in after him because I just felt that much. But that was at a stage in my life where I had no kids, I had no career, I had invested nothing in the world, and I had nothing to lose. And now I've got, all of those things, and to be honest, I'm not really a pacifist. If someone attacked my kids or anything like that, I'd certainly defend them. I wouldn't, I haven't gone so far that I would be, I'm not an aggressive person or anything like that. And, I guess I believe in self-defense now, but it was wonderful on one hand to have this pacifistic outlook, but then it was also very naive because I wasn't close to vulnerable people like children. I don't know, it's, too much protection destroys things as well, but I certainly believe in self-defense, whereas before I probably didn't. So I don't know, there you go. It's easy to be pacifistic when you've got nothing on the line, I guess, but then you don't want to go too far the other way as well. Okay, 72. You need a goal to give your life focus. It's all very well to say, I just need to be alright myself and all this kind of stuff, crap. But it's just part of the way we're designed. I think it probably goes back to our evolution and hunter-gatherer days or what have you. We're connected to the world. We need goals. It's just important to have goals. I mean, you've got to sort yourself out inside as well, but part of sorting yourself out inside will come from having an external goal that you're working to. But having said that though, this is 73, you don't want to be so focused inside that you lose balance, so focused on a goal that you lose balance in life. I think having a balanced life comes from involving yourself in a lot of opposite and contrary things. And if you're so focused on one thing in particular, you get out of balance, and it's really bad for yourself and people around you, particularly children. And I guess people who rely on you or who are vulnerable to to, you know, the effects of being too focused on one thing. And to be perfectly honest, I find at times when I've been too focused on one thing, you lose your sense of value of yourself, you lose your sense of how valuable you are to others. And in my particular case, I've you know, had some kind of mood, depression, high, low kind of stuff, which has been bad for the kids and stuff like that. And you know, to that degree, your goals aren't worth chasing when they give you that kind of result, or, you know, when you're like that, when chasing them puts you into that kind of position. You can still pursue goals, but just not in that kind of degree. Okay, 74. Let's hear that. That's a. I'm in France at the moment, and there's scooters with no mufflers. Okay. Okay. No one walks in anyone else's shoes. You know, we've got. Okay, obviously some people. I'm talking a little extreme here, but you know, we've got all of these groups and cultures and subsets and that, and they've all got their point of view on everything, but they don't see the world from everyone else's point of view. And you find that when you do, which is sometimes just as simple as travelling somewhere and listening and living with people and getting life from their point of view, experiencing it from their point of view, when you do, you realise that we're all just the same. You know, we're all just the same. And I think just realising that would solve most of the world's problems, to be honest. Okay, 75. Things aren't always getting better. You know, some things are getting better over time, but I think a lot of things are getting worse. And I think there's a bit of a myth that that the past was steeped in ignorance and things were always worse back then, embarrassingly worse back then. I think that's a bit of a myth put out by youth or the people who market to youth to avoid people taking responsibility or taking a mature responsibility now, or even acknowledging the kind of lives that older people have had, all the responsibility that they've taken. Doesn't mean that everything that happened in the past was good, but to suggest that all the changes that have happened for the better is just ridiculous. So yeah, I mean, it's an example of self-centeredness, I think. Okay, another favourite one of mine. 76. The politically correct people who think that, you know, everyone and everything has to be treated with kid gloves, that you can't speak the truth in case you might upset someone. You know, that is just such crap. People are a lot more resilient than, you know, these people make out to be, and the reason why these kind of politically correct people make it out is that way it's either a power trip on for themselves, trying to intercede in the way people relate to each other, or it's just because they identify with people who have suffered, and you know, they're putting their own lack of self-confidence, they're injecting it or transferring it, or whatever the phrase is, onto those people. You know, you should never let you can be tactful for sure, but never stop the truth being said. Yeah, so that's it. Okay, 77. Every country, I believe, should have a Bill of Rights for children, and this should be to proactively protect them against anything that could happen. Because, like I was saying with that sign, or so many other things, you know, it's the children who are the most vulnerable, who are usually the ones thought of last. Every child has a right to safety, has a right to be loved, has a right to their innocence, has a right not to be affected by the complexities and often the bad elements of the adult world. So a Bill of Rights, I think, will go a huge way to proactively stopping things from happening. You know, because everything really then would have to be considered in terms of that. So, okay, 78. Don't pass on a bad decision. You have the opportunity to be the link that breaks a chain of bad things happening, you know. Yeah, if you're being told to do something, you're being part of something that you know is not right, well, stop it, basically. 79. Now, I'm not saying this applies to some people I know now, but universities, to a large degree, I've found have been the place where creative or free thinking goes to die. It's been more about getting you to think a certain way than getting you to think. So I'm not saying all people are like that there, because I know, or hope, that some aren't, but and look at all the uni I've done over the years, and that's been one of my predominant experiences there. Okay, 80. Now, Oppenheimer said there are those who would protect freedom so much that in the end there are no freedoms left to protect, and that's true. But it is also true that there are those who would protect freedom so much that in the end there's nothing we're free of. And I think that is something that really needs to be thought about. It's good to have a civil rights or civil libertarian movement protecting against government becoming too intrusive or too strong, but then they have to have a certain amount of that, or as I say, there's nothing we'll be free of. You've got to get the balance, and I think sometimes the balance is going the wrong way. Okay, 81, the importance of compromise. When you compromise on someone, it's not just the argument or the agreement that's the key thing, it's the fact that you're recognising and letting someone else into your outlook or your agreement on what you're doing. And that's probably the more important thing than whatever the act is or the argument that's being compromised on. And you might feel you've lost the argument, but you've never lost yourself. And if it's a good compromise, then you've gained a closeness. A good compromise should bring you closer to yourself. Okay, 82. It's important to realise that things can affect you long before you realise that they are, and then you can go off and act in ways that are a reaction to this even before you realise that that's truly what you're doing. And I think as an adult, it's very important to reflect on this and to forgive yourself for things that you did when you were a kid, when you couldn't possibly have dealt with these things that were affecting you. There's lots of different things that applies to, I think, in people's lives, because it's hard enough as an adult dealing with things correctly, let alone there's no way you can as a kid, or fully as a kid. So think about it in your own life and where it applies, and forgive yourself for it. 83. As a parent, it's bring up your kids right, get in there, live their life with them, share it with them, grow with them, experience it with them, let go, let them go off, when the time's right. But really be a good parent. And there's there's nothing greater than you can do if you're a parent than to be a good parent. And the other point I had there is that when your kids do something morally good, really let them know how proud you are of them for that. That's much more important than letting them know they got that bit of homework right or something, even though that's important. It's a moral and the personal growth, and showing them how proud you are of them, that's really valuable. Okay, 84. Don't just avoid weaknesses. I guess there's some weaknesses that you can deal with and overcome, and they're no longer weaknesses, but actively travel down the path of your strengths. Pursue things that you can do greatness with. Okay, 85. Children need both a good mother and a good father. The differences between the two are really subtle, but really profound and really important for the kids. You know, they really need, for a child to grow up well balanced, they really need a good mother and a good father. I think it's probably because that's the way we evolved. But, you know, I think that's the most important thing in a kid's life, to have a good mother and a good father. Okay, 86. The universe, you know, life. No one knows where it came from, how it came to be, you know, not any scientific point of view or any religious point of view. No one really knows. And the point is, it doesn't really matter, because we're here now. The thing that matters most is that we care and love each other and care for each other. And, you know, don't get caught up on those stupid arguments, basically. You know, I don't think we can, though, and I don't think it's important, you know. Just go along for the ride and be a good person on it. And, you know, I think if we knew the less but cared the more, the world would be so much better. You know, we're so caught up now in the pursuit of knowledge to try and make things better. Well, you know, I think the pursuit of care or of love would make the world better. You know, of course there's a space for knowledge and science and so on, but more important is care than knowledge. So, yeah, do that. Okay, 87. This is a really interesting argument which taught me a lot. It's the idea of inherited disadvantage. Now, it's really important in countries that have an indigenous history or a colonial history. Years ago, it's probably about 10 years ago actually, I was in Tully in northern Queensland doing some research for a play with the Jitterbal Aboriginal people there. And the elder who I was working with and was showing me everything, he said, you know, the one thing that really frustrates him about white people is that they're quite happy to accept the good things that their grandfathers did. And in this region in Queensland, it was the grandfathers' era, the frontier period. You know, they're quite happy to accept the good things that have come down to them from what the grandfathers did, but not the bad things. And I thought about that and the penny really dropped, because it's so true. You know, you've got however many generations back, they did things which have brought good things to some people and bad things to others. By and large, the good things have all gone towards the descendants of the dominant culture, and the bad things have all gone to the descendants of the culture that was dominated. You know, it's the inherited advantage versus inherited disadvantage. Now, I know you have the argument that the sins of the father aren't the sins of the son, but still you've got to ask yourself, why have things become so much better for this culture and not that culture? And once you realise that, then you're far more willing to let others in, give them a chance, understand them, work with them. Again, hand up, not a hand out. People have got to stand on their own 2 feet, because otherwise it's not helping them really at all. But you certainly start to understand the historical processes that are still acting in us today. So I think understanding the notion of inherited disadvantage is a key issue to understanding the way things are in the world. So that was very important for me. That was okay. Having said that, though, point 88, I do think that Indigenous and disenfranchised people, Indigenous and or whichever this will then suit, you know, you still have to focus on what you have in common with everyone. You know, don't end up believing a victim mentality, because there's nothing inherently in you that means you have to be a victim, or you can't be the best that you can be, or live your life to its full fruition. You know, there's nothing at all in you inherently about that. So it's like that thing about assimilation, you know. Focus more on what you have in common, and then you'll see what opportunities come. You know, it's also to do with self-belief. But also, you know, the dominant culture, and these examples, they have to realise they don't own the world or rule the world, they share the world. So out of that too, you know, there should be more of a coming together and an understanding and a closeness. Okay, 89, and this is an extremely important point. It's better to do things more for what they are than what you can get out of them. And the reason for that is that when you do them for what they are, you're making your actions closer to truth, basically. And they can only lead to good things. Now, I say more rather than absolutely because, there is a degree to which you do things for what will come from them, like planting a crop because the food will come. They're basic practical things, but particularly in the way you treat others, the way you look at the world, the way you look at yourself, don't think what you can get out of this situation, think about what the situation it is yourself. And often why you do something is actually what you're doing. So I really think that's the key to transforming yourself and as an effect, not as an aim, the world. So, yeah, I'm sure everyone realises this at some stage in their life, but I can tell you that was a really big thing for me. And I did. Okay, 90. In the Western world, we're living a lifestyle that's untenable, both socially and environmentally. We need smaller, more community-based societies that are more ecologically sustainable. I shouldn't even say more, that are ecologically sustainable. And we need, it's funny, I watched a documentary about a brilliant German and an American, I think it was called Food is Waste, or Waste is Food. And it was just about making environmentally sustainable communities and buildings and things like that. And the German guy said, you can't just think of your relationship. You should think of your relationship with the environment like a relationship with a girlfriend. If someone said, how's it going with your girlfriend? You wouldn't go, oh, it's sustainable. You'd want it to be great. You'd want it to be fantastic. You'd want it to be rip-roaring. And your relationship with the environment should be the same. It's not enough that it's sustainable. It has to be positively growing and nurtured and boosted. So we have to change our society for that, because if we don't, we won't be here. It's as simple as that. Okay, 91, one small example which I think could help a lot is vertical farming, the idea of basically building high-rises that are farms. And I think eventually this will become commonplace throughout the world. And I've seen these designs on paper, but I don't know where any are being built. And obviously, as the world's population is increasing, the amount of arable land isn't increasing at the same rate. But at least by building these structures, you are effectively making more arable land with each successive floor and a high-rise like that. And not only that, you could eventually have cities based around them, and so you would again have a direct connection with the cycles of nature and with growing and preparing and consuming your own food. So I think vertical farming is a big thing for the future, and hopefully it will start to come to fruition very soon. Okay, 92. Now, the world, I think, has three options ahead of us. One, we can keep going as we are, and we can collapse. You look at all those huge amounts of people in all these cities around the world, they're all sustained by energy that comes from somewhere else, and they're all sustained by food that comes from somewhere else. Just one of those things has to go, and the whole lot collapses. And what only the people with land, either farmers or the people living a subsistence or hunter-gatherer lifestyle, they're the ones that could survive. And so if we do have something go wrong, I think there'll be millions of people dying in a collapse like that. And that's one, and I think that's inevitable the way we are going. So that's one option. The other option is a gradual and intentional change in towards a subsistence hunter-gatherer lifestyle, but that couldn't be done with people won't want to do that, and that certainly couldn't be done with the population numbers that we have in the world at the moment anyway. So even if we wanted to, a gradual change towards that isn't likely to happen. And the third option is that we we make our lifestyles environmentally sustainable. And like I was saying earlier, that's actually a really hard thing to do. Everything has to be not just, well, I shouldn't even say sustainable anymore, should I? Everything has to be to the positive advancement of the environment. And if we can't underwrite our whole lifestyle and the means for it that way, then we don't have a future. Simple as that. So that's the 3 options we've got. Okay, number 93. This is the last point, and I've saved it for last because I think it's the most important. Well, no, probably the previous one was most important, but this is important because this is a practical way in which we can start to do what I was talking about in the previous point. And that is, we need to change our economy. We need to change it towards what's called a voluntary economy, where there's no cash, there's no money, there's no material equating of the value of something. Things are done for free and given away. They're done for the value of what they are, and they're given away basically because it's good to do so. And when you do that, you're respecting another person, and you're accepting their needs and their existence as well, instead of seeing what kind of profit you can make out of them. Now, this has kind of been something that's occupied my head for years and years and years. I once read a great piece of graffiti, and it said, what did it say? Capitalism is man exploiting man. Communism is the other way round. You know, that they both have their faults, and neither of them are the answer. You know, probably the reasons are quite well covered, but you can't force a socialistic lifestyle on people, and I don't believe a socialistic lifestyle can exist in a city-state or a large state. It can work in small groups like it does with hunter-gatherers, and I think the reason why it works there is because there's so few people in the group that everyone knows everyone else, everyone has a meaningful relationship with everyone else, and they get a certain sense of value and self-esteem for what they contribute to that group. When you contribute to a large group, like millions of people, where you don't know them all, and when you're forced to do that, which you are under these state-run socialist systems, then it just destroys the human spirit and destroys the want to do these things. So that's why socialism doesn't work, and there's umpteen examples in history for that. Capitalism doesn't work because, well, I think even though it gives you the opportunity to advance yourself, it kind of kids you into thinking that everyone can succeed, when the hierarchical structure of it means that people can't. But, you know, everyone's free to have a go, which is a good thing. But, you know, when you build profits into things, and I understand profits as far as getting back what you put in, but when you build these huge profits in that take more than it ever took you, you end up with these concentrations of wealth and broad areas of poverty. And that's what we have both within states and globally across countries. And that doesn't work either. The only thing that will, I believe, work is a voluntary free economy where people freely contribute and freely take. And a practical way that you can do that is this website that I've written, the Free Economy, or www.freeeconomy.org. And here it is here, I'll put that down there. And what that does is it uses information technology to link supply and demand. So basically, if you've got something you want to give away, you can specify what it is and where it is. And likewise, if you've got something that you need, you can search for what you're looking for and what area you're looking for it from, and the supply and the demand can be linked up. And, you know, it's open-ended. At the moment, the web page is very simple, but I want it to get so complex that you can plan projects, you can plan building houses, you can, you know, look at where you're going to source material and who you're going to provide materials for. And I think the more that you can use from the free economy and then use that to contribute things that you put back into the free economy, the bigger it's going to grow. And we can have a true economy that doesn't create unnecessary waste, and that doesn't that respects people. And I think it's only through having that we will have a future. because then that naturally, well, that plus a environmentally tenable way of living, because I think that leads straight onto that as well. So that, I believe, is that's why I've left that to last, because I think that's probably the most important thing that we can get into now, as well as all the other kind of personal things about changing the way you are, I guess. So anyway, that's it. Hope it makes sense. Just, I don't know, be a good person, and your life is yours. So there you go. Thank you.